Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. Again, the music soundtrack provided by Yue-Sai Kan, my special guest today. We're listening to, I love this one, Jasmine Flower, the National Cinema Symphony Orchestra in China, the most famous piece of Chinese folk music. Puccini used it for the theme song of opera Turandot. And I don't want to skip ahead here too much, Yue-Sai, but you when you were producing your television show, eventually you were just wearing too many hats, and you had to hire and people to do some of the work. And I loved when I read that Ai Weiwei was one of your narrators for One World. And I just spoke with Ai Weiwei, did Turandot in Italy. I'm sure you're aware, and there's a great documentary, and I just interviewed the producers and directors. When I read that Ai Weiwei was your narrator and that you chose this piece of music, I thought, wow, um, what a coincidence. What a beautiful coincidence.
Yeah, this also come to mind uh, about this. I remember right after COVID, right when COVID started, and I need to do a charity event, and I was learning how to do a charity event. I noticed that a lot of these charity events were hosted on television, on the internet, right? And I remember I was very nervous. I said, how am I going to start these things? Because people just float in and out, right, of these broadcasts. So I decided that I'm going to create a 5 minute piece of music at the beginning of the podcast of the broadcast. And you know what I did? I chose the piece of music to I chose this piece of music, and I asked Kenny G to start playing.
Mhm.
So, and then followed by a wonderful singer from India, and a wonderful pianist from London, and a wonderful cellist from Monaco, and a wonderful who else was it? Yeah, another wonderful violinist. And then anyway, the whole piece ended on Lang Lang playing a part of it. And it was really, it just was such a memorable thing that for me, it was,
Mhm.
that was sort of it was sort of a one song that connects one world. I just love this word, one world. The show I did for China was one called One World, and the current social media series I'm doing is also called One World. So I just love that we are actually one world. If we could understand
Yes.
that we are really one world, then we will not be in such trouble today. Am I right? I mean, we
You
are.
are right. Why doesn't that lesson stick? Why don't we remember that? Why is that so easy for us to forget that we are one world and that kindness and trying to understand each other, like you did with your television show, um, so groundbreaking. Why do you think we can't, as human beings, that we forget that lesson so often?
Don't know. I always, especially now, I feel as if all the work we have done all these years have come to naught, because the world is so messy. We're not doing things that we should be doing for each other.
Right.
Uh, but for example, why are we not doing more for? Why are we not doing more for the pollution of the air, right? And why are we still using diesel? Why are we still using so much gas, right? Why are we not trying to clean up the air with this? I mean, with the carbon zero, that's a great idea, but why are we not doing it? And why do we have a president that thinks that that's just not important? And I don't understand it. So I feel like whatever I have done, for my in my life, I it's just not working enough. It's just not working. It's a sad comment, isn't it?
It is because I don't know how to respond to that, but I could see how you see that. That was how you could feel that way because you've done so much and made such big strides, and then it's almost like we reset. We keep resetting back to we got to keep learning the lessons the hard way as human beings. And it's very sad. Well, if you're just joining us on the Jeremiah Show, well, welcome. Where have you been? We've had a great conversation so far with Yue-Sai Kan. She's an Emmy-winning television host and producer, a successful entrepreneur, and that's an understatement. She's a fashion icon, a best-selling author, 10, count them, 10, and a humanitarian. People magazine called her the most famous woman in China. ABC and The Observer also said the same thing. I want to read something that out of the first couple pages of Yusai's new book, The Most Famous Woman in China, and how she did it. We're talking about today. This woman making a world of difference on Chinese TV. In the world of television, Yue-Sai Kan is bigger in terms of ratings and shares than Barbara Walters, Phil Donahue, Johnny Carson, and Oprah Winfrey put together. That's from the Chicago Tribune. Just incredible. Congratulations on all of that. So we're talking about the new book. I want you to pick up a copy. It is an entertaining read. It's heartfelt. You're going to feel something when you read this book, and you're going to laugh, you'll cry, and you'll cheer for Yue-Sai Kan. You're going to cheer for her and how she did it, how she made this incredible life, and how many lives she's affected by doing so. Let's talk about that last part, Yue-Sai. Welcome back. How she did it. So 39 years ago, if my math is right, in 1986, Chinese people got their first glimpse of the outside world by watching television at home. Every Sunday, they would gather around the TV to watch Yue-Sai Kan's One World, the 15-minute first travel program on Chinese television, which aired twice a week in Chinese and then in English, brought Western society closer to an audience of 300 million Chinese people weekly. And remember, if you can, this is before cell phones, this is before internet, this is before CNN and all the cable and streaming. Cable was in its infant stages at this time, and China was self-contained. It was a mysterious place to the world. And Yue-Sai was ambitious enough to tackle her idea of bringing the planet into every Chinese living room. One World became the first TV documentary series produced in the West, but shown in China. So, Yue-Sai, you're young, you're in your 20s, you're trying to figure it out, right? How did you come up with the idea for the show, and why was it important to you that you produce this show?
Important because I could feel it. It was important. Can you imagine this? Okay, if you
Yeah,
come,
tell us about China and the world at this point. Like, take us back. What's it like?
you have to understand. I was born in China, of course, but when I was 4 years old, we left China and moved to Hong Kong. My parents we were really immigrants, truly immigrants. It reminds me of like going through Ellis Island, right? Because
Hmm.
imagine if the British guy was standing at the border and sitting there and trying to approve or not approve. He could easily have said to my parents, "You're not approved," and so my parents would have to go back to China. So if we were approved, we went into China, Hong Kong, and we were really very. We had very little. But the interesting thing is that even though we had very little to start with, but we never felt poor. First of all, we had no comparison. Okay, in those days, everybody was poor. Everybody was living in a kind of a poor state anyway, and we weren't really, so we weren't really able to to see. But later on, as we grew up a little bit more, and Hong Kong became more successful, and more and more people became more successful. And then I noticed that my parents were always able to give me things that I wanted to have. For example, I said I wanted to learn to play the piano. They would find the best teacher for me. my first teacher was a Russian pianist, and that time he was the most famous in Hong Kong. His name is Harry Orr, and I remember he used to give me an hour lesson every week, and my mommy would drive me there every week just to have. Now, when I say drive, my mommy was driving a Volkswagen, and even though my other girlfriends in that time already beginning to have very good cars and famous cars, right? But at least my family had a Volkswagen, right? And so in a way, my parents never deprived us of anything. So I never felt poor. Why am I telling you this right now? but it's interesting that when you have nothing to compare, and when your parents are so loving and so caring and so generous with you, you never felt
Yeah.
poor. Never felt poor. I never felt that if you ask me what my parents gave me, most importantly is a sense of self. My parents never made us feel inferior. It doesn't matter whether we had money or not. We didn't have money for sure, but my parents were really very good in this way. We were never not given anything. In other words, they were always most generous. If I wanted to learn the ballet, they would send me to the best little ballet school. So my parents were always, but if I want to have money to chew but buy bubble gum, I won't get it. See?
There was a value placed on things and not to be wasteful.
Isn't that interesting? The value of money is important. If your parents teach you that every dress you wear has to be an Hermes dress, something then you're raised very differently than me.
So describe China, what you knew of it. I mean, it was a poor country, but it was going through a change. Explain to me what the Chinese government, what they realized, and how they realized they had a problem and they wanted to um, to improve the life of everyone in China, improve the country's standing, improve its wealth, and open up a little bit more. At this time, it was really closed down, wasn't it?
Yes. In those days, you had to go through, for example, Canada in order to go into China, for example. And you couldn't even go directly from America to China. And then Nixon came, right? Nixon went to China and they began to open China. China began to allow you to get a visa from Hong Kong to go into China. So I was living in America. My father and mother still living in Hong Kong at that time. But what is interesting is that Deng Xiaoping in 1979 said, he said, we need to open up. We need to open China up. We need to learn how to open up. So like everything the Chinese have done, they've done it very thoughtfully and very smartly. What they did was that they opened a city called Shenzhen up. That was a fishing village of no more than 200,000 people that living there, okay, at that time. And they said, we're going to use this because this is a city that is closest to Hong Kong. So they tried to open door policy experiment started from Shenzhen. Shenzhen, this town today, is the Silicon Valley of China. Today, you cannot even believe what it looks like in Shenzhen. There are 13 million people living there. It was an unbelievable place. To coming back to what I saw in China at that time, China was so poor. I remember I was being picked up in a car, and I looked around. There was no cars around. They were all bicycles, and people were all wearing. They were all wearing gray, dark blue, black clothes, no color, and everybody looked exactly the same. They have the same hairdo, the same everything. I don't believe that they knew that they had very little. I don't believe so. Because as I said before, if you don't have anything to compare, everybody's as equally poor as you are, then you can't. So Deng Xiaoping's idea was to open China up. And so he said, what they said very cleverly, they said, how are we going to open if the people in China knew nothing about the outside world, and the people from the outside knew nothing about China, how the hell are we going to open up? So they were so clever. They said, okay, the easiest way for us to have our education about people is to educate them through television. It's not a very clever idea. So they said, I happened to be the one they chose because I was doing a show called Looking East in America. And that was a show that I was introducing Asian culture to the American public. I started doing that in the late 70s, 80s. So they came to me and they said, the story is a bit longer one, but they came to me and asked me to do something. But my relationship with China really started from PBS. And I think I did a lot. I wrote a lot about my experience with PBS and how it became the most amazing, open, the most amazing historic event between PBS and CCTV. But anyway, coming back to the series, they because I did it so successfully, they invited me to China. Now, that was amazing because I was just, don't forget, I was not very, I was still a young woman, and I was going to a country that I knew very little about. And imagine if somebody invited you to North Korea, would you go without anybody? I went without anybody. I went by myself. It was, I just don't know how I did it, but I did it because I know that they wanted to thank me for what I had done for them, that historic broadcast on PBS. So
can I make a comment on how I think you did it? I think I think you're very, very brave. I think you have no fear in a way, although you're cautious and you're very thoughtful. And sometimes saying a person has no fear makes you think that they just jump and leap. And I don't mean that at all. I think that you were you knew, you had a perspective, you had an insight that you didn't know you had. And the first segment when we talked about your upbringing, your family, your sisters, your mother and your father, I think a lot of that came from that really, really great foundation that was built. And that is you, the person that is you. So the challenge was, how could we wrench open China and help people inside and out of China understand a much wider world? And your solution was what?
well, it wasn't my solution per se. I was asked to help with the solution.
Okay.
Television would be a good tool to educate their people. Let me tell you, I want to bring you back to 1984, December. It was the first time I went to China as a guest of the China Central Television. And they invited me to, as I said, they want to thank me. This much I know. But the China that I saw was not only this gray, old, decrepit country, but I have to tell you, I remember distinctly that all I saw were cabbage. It was December. It was the December time because it was only time between Christmas and New Year that I had the time to go because I didn't have to work so hard that week. So I went and I remember there were a couple of things that really hit me, not just only the bicycles and the gray clothes, but there were cabbage all over China, everywhere, in the balconies, in trucks, and in the streets. On the streets, people were selling cabbage all over the place. And it was such an extraordinary scene. And I said to my translator, remember, I couldn't speak Mandarin at that time. And I said, what on earth is all this cabbage? He said, well, because we need to store enough cabbage in our home, and we will pickle them, we will salt them, we will dry them, because that's the only green vegetable we could eat throughout the next 3 months this is how very, very poor China was. And I remember, I love baked sweet potato. And I saw this guy in the street with a big drum like thing and was selling sweet potato. And I remember I was so excited. I said, oh, let's stop. Let's get some sweet potato. So I stopped and I asked my guide, my translator. I said, "Would you like? How many would you like?" He said, "Yue-Sai, I when during the Cultural Revolution, which just ended, right? The Cultural Revolution, for a total of 2 years, I was eating nothing but sweet potatoes. So if I don't eat any of them in the rest of my life, I would be very happy." And he said something that is extremely interesting for me, because you remember, China was a communist country. What is the communist system? The communist system says that everything that you are taken care of by the government from cradle to grave. Okay, that is the communist system. That means everything is taken care of. When I went to China, people still have what they call food stamps and the food, how do you say this? Food coupons. You are given, let's say, a 30 ounces of oil every week, or whatever it is that they were given out, or 5 ounces of meat every. It was a rationed economy, right? That was what China was all about. And he told me that this sweet yam seller is the beginning. They were just beginning to allow people to do self-entrepreneurial enterprise. Is that interesting? So in other words, when I went to China, was just the beginning of this incredible drive to open itself up. And of course, the smart experiment that happened in Shenzhen was so successful. Even when I opened my cosmetic company, I was registered in Shenzhen. My first office, my first office, and my first factory were all in Shenzhen. So I know Shenzhen very well, and how it developed from this tiny little fishing village to this unbelievable metropolis today. You cannot even believe what you're looking at when you see this. This is the reason why I think I'm very fortunate in that I saw China at its very beginning, and I see China today that hasn't stopped astonishing me. So imagine, I am one of those lucky few. I got involved. Not only was I my witness, I got involved because I do actually do things. I do television show. I do a company called Yue-Sai Cosmetics. So in other words, you don't only see me on television, but you also can hold a cosmetic, a lipstick in your hand that bears my name. So I'm one of those very rare people who can tell the story. I don't know if there's another person that can tell the story as much as I can do it. Anyway.
I don't think there is. I agree with you. The Guangzhou Evening News said of Yue-Sai, though she is not an architect, she is building a cultural bridge across the Pacific Ocean. Though she is not a weaver, she is busy weaving a ribbon of friendship between the Chinese people and the people of the world. That's a great compliment there, Yue-Sai. What was your vision for the show? What was your vision? What did you want to accomplish with the show?
I was extremely nervous. On top of the fact that I was scared. Many reasons. First of all, I didn't have a lot of money to produce, right? Because and also my contract with my sponsors were all very different. I said that if the government cancels the show, which could easily have happened, I would have to return all the money to them. And it's a very scary time. And I had so little money to produce. And my ambition was to cover so many countries for the Chinese. And always bearing in mind, in the back of my mind, that at any moment, the Chinese government might say, the show is canceled, because some important person in the background would say, well, this is not good. This is spiritual pollution, whatever it is they can say about my show, right? So I was produced under a tremendous amount of stress in so many ways. But but at the end of the day, I did it, right? I did it. I'm very happy to say that I did it. But that was, you see, after you have done something. By the way, I did not know that I was so famous because I was all that time, you know, those 3-4 years that I used to produce. I was outside of China. I wasn't producing in China. I was sending programs into China, right? And they had to approve it. I had to produce 6-7 shows before it, so that they had the time to critique it and to the amazing thing that they did. They only made 2 comments about the shows I did. They never said this cannot be done or da da da. They never even
What
gave
were
me.
those 2 things that they had you take out?
Oh, this is very interesting. So first of all, they never told me what to produce.
Right.
What not to produce. Then I later on found out why. Because even the CCTV people, China Central Television people, had no idea what the world was all about. How could they tell me what to produce, right? And also the other second reason I think that they didn't do it, because they said to themselves, well, what if I tell them something and I got into trouble later on and my neck is on the board, you know what I mean? I don't mean literally, by the way. So in other words, they were very, very concerned about telling me what to do, right? So nobody told me what to do. I was just doing it the way I felt China should know them. So what was your question?
What were those 2? You said that only 2 times out of all the shows that you produced, they stepped in and maybe had you change it or edit.
The first one is a shot that I did in Denmark. You know that in Denmark in the summer, the women were topless. Yes, I mean it's on the beach all over, and they wear something underneath, but the top is topless. And they said, Yue-Sai, can you please take that shot out? They didn't want
Okay,
that.
that's understandable.
The one about Mother Teresa. It is politically sensitive because the Chinese government did not approve, or maybe not to say approve, did not. Well, yeah, but Catholicism is not something that they were, really. They, the nun, I mean, Mother Teresa was a nun, right? And they were very sensitive about it. And they said, Yue-Sai, I don't think we can do Mother Teresa. So I said to them, I said, you must air Mother Teresa. It is a show, it's in a show called the what is this thing in Sweden? The Peace Prize, Nobel Peace Prize. So I said, she is, even though she is a nun, that's immaterial. I said, but she got the Nobel Peace Prize. So it's a segment that I did about Nobel Prize. Okay, so I was in Sweden. I filmed that, and I put her segment into this to say that she is a Nobel Prize winner, and they passed it. So I tell you, I was very lucky. Nobody believed me when I said that they really didn't censor anything, truly censored anything. So the Chinese saw something that I told them to.
It's amazing. It's so amazing, so inspirational. I did a disservice. I didn't ask you to describe what the CCTV is and what to explain to the listeners what the CCTV is if they don't understand. But at that time, China was dark, right? And the government decided, as you've said, to open up to the world a little bit, and they produced and brought your show in to do that, to be that vessel of change, and to open up the world to the Chinese people. But the CCTV, describe that. I mean, at that point, what happens on the CCTV? Is it?
CCTV, China Central Television, is the national network of China. And in those days, there was only one station, and they had only about 5-6 hours a day. And most of the programs on that station were only fed by, there were journalists on the show itself, but everything they say is fed. My show, amazing. It was a show that they did not feed me the words. These are all produced by myself, right? But today, I mean, in those days, they couldn't pay me, right? They said, we'd love to have a show like this. I said, pay me. They said, we have no, well, Jeremiah, you have to remember, in those days there was no advertising on television. Why? It's because there was no consumer products in China. No, advertising is only for products, right? There was nothing in China, nothing.
I love the story about how your first sponsor was General Mills and with the Folgers coffee, but nobody in China drank coffee at that time.
Hey,
It was
let me
tea.
let me tell you something truly interesting. You know, you have to go back to history in order to compare what it is today. Because just now I was in Shanghai, on my little street, there were 8 coffee shops, 8 coffee shops. And there's a coffee shop, you've never heard of it. Manor is across another Manor, and further down the street, another Manor coffee shop. Okay, and not 8 coffee shops, 8. And then if you go a few blocks from my home, there is the biggest Starbucks coffee shop in China. Is gigantically huge. They say that the Shanghainese drink about 200 million cups of coffee a day, and in the Chinese already grow coffee, you know, in Yunnan province particularly, and as I tell you, the changes are so enormous. You have to ask me why I think China becomes what it is later on. Okay, what are the issues? What are the reasons why they grow like this? You know, it is just it's astonishing to me how it has changed from this old, decrepit, dusty, ugly country.
What part do you think that you played in?
Oh, of course, I play a very important part. I opened their eyes to the world. I mean, if my show is the first show of its kind, that means every image I gave them was the first time they saw that image.
Yeah. Can
And
you imagine that? That's like putting a camera on the moon or on Mars or right? It's and just being fascinated. Wow, what does that world look like? We've never seen it before.
I must tell you another interesting story. It's in the book. The minister saw the 3 pilots that I did for them for approval. They wanted to see what I would do for them, right? And afterwards, he looked at me and he said, "Yue-Sai, do you shoot like this in America? Are you dressed like this in America?" I was very concerned. In those days, the women on television were all without makeup and no jewelry, and there were no colors and everything. And I was very sensitive to when I was making the 3 pilots, and I was dressed like that, a bit like that. I said, no, of course not. In America, I wear my colorful clothes, I wear jewelry, I wear makeup. He said, I would like you to do television show the way you do it in America. So in other words, it was the first time the Chinese see me in red clothes, you know, a different color clothes. They can't believe I was probably like somebody from Mars for them. You know what I mean? Except that I was Chinese, and they felt very, very close to me. And because I could speak Chinese, but with a terrible accent. But in those days, remember, I just learned to speak Chinese in 2 years, right?
Yeah, and what I love there's a story in there about how you would when you went to bed in New York City and you were learning Mandarin, you would will yourself to dream in Mandarin. That's how determined you were to,
One
speak.
one of the things about this book, that we're specifically talking about, Jeremiah, is that if you also go into the QR codes, you actually can see some of the programs I have done in China or in America. I have done a lot of shows in America too. I did a lot of series for PBS as well, and you may not even be aware of it. You know, I did a very successful one called Doing Business in Asia,
Hmm.
which I think almost all the universities, libraries kept those videos for business schools. In those days, I taught them how to do business in Korea, in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, and in Japan. And that became a very, very successful series for PBS, actually.
Did you say that was one of your most successful for rating wise and viewers or
So
ratings?
definitely the most successful financially
One
speaking.
world.
For years, we were selling those videos. For years, we were selling those videos. But the most successful one, okay, let me tell you, there's a show that I did called Journey Through a Change in China. It was done in the 1988, I think like that, 1988. And it was when China was just beginning to open up. And I took a TV crew that went all over China. And from my hometown in Guilin to Shanghai, to Beijing, to Xi'an, to very northern part of China, to Heilongjiang province. And I was the first one on the river Amur, where the Russian-Chinese border was there. And I was the first one to actually go into Chairman Mao's home in the Chinese White House. And I mean, it was one television show that after we aired it, American Express sponsored it, and after it was aired, I got a phone call from a guy, and his name, I am Senator Daniel Inouye. I just watched your show and I tracked you down. And he said, I was so impressed with the show, and it was the best show about China, and especially as it documented the opening of China in those days. It's like a dragon, right? Just woke up, right? And he said it was the best show I've ever seen on China. And he said some really amazing things. I think that his letter is in this book itself. Yeah, it is. I said, oh, I'm so impressed. I was so blown away, right? I mean, I was so blown away. Senator Inouye, my God. And he said, I said, oh, Senator, I would love you to put it in writing, and I can send it to American Express, my sponsor, to tell him how you felt about it. So he said, I'll do something even better than that. I'm going to put you on the congressional record.
Wow.
And his letter is in the book itself. Actually, that is one of the proudest things. I mean, you can get an Emmy, you can do anything, but not everybody has a show has a recognition in the congressional record, right? I mean, so I'm very proud of that. Yeah.
Yes, you should be. How you say how much? Oh, let me back up. So you wanted to be the vessel of change with your show. You wanted to give hope to people, and hope is one of the things that human beings need, almost like air and water is hope. How much hope did you give to the people of China? Have you thought about that?
I'm not so sure about whether it's the word hope, Jeremiah. I think it's the desire to reach for more.
Okay.
It really more appropriate. Remember, I told you that they don't know the difference, but once I open their eyes up, right? Once I open their eyes up, wow, this is Paris. Wow, this is Italy. Wow, this is Sweden. They say to themselves, oh my God, this is a world that I never knew anything about. I would like to get to know more about it. This is that then you inspire them to not to have hope so much, but inspire them to actually learn more about the outside world. And this is the reason why I think that China just opened itself up like that at that time. Of course, there were many, many problems involved because it was so poor, so poor. And so I think that, it's interesting. I can be walking down the street on any time. Somebody could come up to me and say, Yue-Sai, I'm here because of you, because you inspired me to come here, right? And the same thing with my cosmetics. I can guarantee you that millions of Chinese women who come up to me would say to me, oh, they do come up to me and say, the first lipstick I have in my life is yours. So it actually makes me feel pretty damn good.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you feel? does that make you feel?
feel
Pretty darn good, huh?
I just kept saying, if you do something good, good thing come back to you. You will be absolutely surprised how they come back to you manyfold. Okay, we're talking about not just television and cosmetics, but especially in philanthropy. You don't know how it comes back to you.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that our job in this life is to help other people and help each other. And if there's something that you feel that you are inspired to do to help others, but do it, because you'll be surprised how well you'll be rewarded, even if it is just spiritually. Okay, even if it is just spiritually. I mean, I can tell you millions of stories that 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 I find that what I've done anywhere, China or America, because I do charity both countries, right? And it's really quite gratifying. Yeah, do good.
My special guest today, Yue-Sai Kan. We're listening to a soundtrack, a music soundtrack that Yue-Sai provided for the show here. Thank you so much, Yue-Sai. We're going to go out here with Fantasy, impromptu in C sharp minor. This is a song that you used to play on your piano.
Yeah, it was intimidating when when I was 6 years old. I played no perfect, right? And
Yeah.
now struggling to play. That's why it intimidates me. It's a very strange way to
I
say.
Yeah, you say that you used to play it to show off with people. I like that. Okay, so we're gonna take a real quick break. We're with Yue-Sai Kan, and we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.